Hello everybody and welcome back to art. Today's lesson we are going to be doing a little bit of drawing, a little bit of watercolor, okay? So make sure that you have these supplies that I'm going to go through real quick. A cup of clean water and a cup of dirty water that you can use to wash your brushes, a pencil. You will need your watercolor palette, okay, the one that does come with a brush, but if you have one of these or if you have other brushes at home that can help make it go a little bit faster because it'd be bigger brush, move some of that paint around, an eraser, paper towel, your sketchbook, okay, your scissors, because we are going to cut this in half because working a little bit smaller does help. Now again, you can cut it in half and you can cut it in half again to make 4 really small ones if you want to do this a couple times. So I'm going to show you how to do it with one cut straight down the middle, and then I'm going to do a picture on this one. And then also today you're going to need some salt, okay? So what I'm first going to do, okay, is I'm going to go ahead and fold my paper in half, straight down the middle, fold it, take it back open, take these scissors, and I'm going to go ahead and cut straight down the middle so that I only have to work with one of these sides. So again, working with watercolor sometimes takes a lot of time, so we're going to save some time by cutting it into a smaller piece. Now remember, watercolor paper has a smoother side and a bumpy side. We're always trying to paint on that bumpy side, okay? So make sure you have that bumpy side. So I'm going to set my extra across. I don't need my scissors anymore unless you're cutting it again this way. So what we're actually going to be doing today is we're going to be taking our sketchbook and we're going to be kind of practicing maybe a couple of shapes that we've done before to be able to get this project kind of going. So we're going to be drawing a fish. So what we're going to do first is we're going to kind of practice our oval shape, okay? So if you want more of a circle fish or like an oval fish, your first shape is going to be kind of a big oval, okay? Oval shape, right? The next step for you is that you're going to go ahead and practice a triangle shape like that. Triangle at the top. You could add a triangle down here, a big triangle down here. You could add a big triangle here and another big triangle right here. You can add a circle and a face. Just like that. Okay, so now you got some good shapes with your fish. If you feel like you want to practice some of these, you can make it more of a circle fish. You can still add those triangles at the back. If you wanted to add him here in the middle, where it looks like he's kind of coming at you, you can do it that way too. All right, so what we're going to do is kind of decide which one you want. You guys can kind of practice your shapes just by themselves too if you feel like, you know what, I need to practice my shapes a little bit more and make sure that I have the shapes that I want to be able to make the fish that I feel like is going to work out best for my picture, right? You guys, if you feel like, can add lips. So let's say if I want to do this kind of a fish again, draw my triangles, big triangle, big triangle. Let's say I want him here, big fish lips, big triangle. Okay, if you feel like any of these are working for you, we can move to the next step. So what I'm going to do is kind of keep this handy. I'm going to go ahead and middle of my paper, I'm going to go ahead and kind of draw a big oval. Remember, light with a pencil. Big oval shape. Triangle shape. Triangle shape. Triangle shape. Little triangle. Big triangle. Circle. And maybe some big fish lips. Okay, I now have the basic shape of my fish. All right, so it's a good starting point. The next step is to kind of decide what you feel like you want, because he's underwater, what kind of stuff you want. Do you want plants in the water, so some squiggly lines, okay, that I'm probably going to end up coloring in a little bit later. This is kind of maybe some kelp something coming in from the bottom. I could have more triangle shapes like this. You don't have to do anything if you don't want, but just keep in mind, any of these shapes that you do, you're probably going to have to color in a little bit later with the watercolor. Alright, boys and girls, so now that I have all of the kind of grassiness under the sea here, I have kelp and a bunch of different colored plants, okay, I can go ahead and start thinking about the colors that I want to use. So, I have my pencil, have my watercolor. I'm going to go ahead and open it up, right, I have all of my supplies here ready, kind of at the ready. And I'm going to go ahead and do a blue ocean background, okay? So what I'm going to do is use a brush that I have to kind of help this video go a little bit faster. It's a bigger brush. It's going to move some of that around. If you have a bigger brush at home and you want to use that for the background, go ahead and do that. Remember, with watercolor, we always do the background first because it's farther away. That's what you kind of do first. Now, you also work from the lightest color to your darkest color. So I'm going to go ahead and add blue, and it's going to be a light blue. So just kind of mixing, I touch the paint, I bring it over here, I kind of mix it in my palette, wash my brush, okay? Check it, pretty clean. Clean water, touch clean water, wet down the paper in the background, okay? Make sure it's nice and wet, because what we're gonna do is use some of the techniques that we used before. But notice how I'm not getting water on my fish or anywhere in between the little things that I drew. Okay, so all I'm doing is adding water into the areas that I want to be blue. If you get water on your fish and you start painting with that blue, what's going to happen is that blue is going to end up going into anywhere that your water had touched before. So watch this. Now I touch water, okay, I touch the blue that I've mixed. Now I can come straight over here, and we're going to go ahead and use some of that tie-dye technique that we talked about before. So I've put it here at the top, okay, put it here at the top. And I can even pick up my paper now and kind of tilt it around and let the water push where I want it to go, right? So notice how it's not getting on my fish because I didn't put water on my fish. Notice how it's going around my fish. Okay, see how it goes straight around my fish? Again, I touch water, I touch paint, I come in here, I can even add more and keep going just like I've done before in the past. So more water, more tie-dye looking. You can always pick it up, move it around, let it kind of do its thing, just like water kind of does its thing. So this is kind of playing on the technique that we've learned before with our watercolor, okay, that watercolor tie-dye project. We're kind of doing the same thing, just this time we have to be careful not to get it on our fish. And if you do get it on your fish, what you can do is with your paper towel, you come in very gently with the corner, and you just kind of pick it up. It's kind of an eraser in that way. All I'm doing is watercoloring in between some of this stuff here, being careful. Now I pick it up, and again I can move it around. Move the watercolor around. Okay, anywhere that you want it to be blue for your background color, if you want it to be green, whatever it is. Okay. Now that I have my background color of ocean blue, I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush off, okay? Make sure all those areas are where you want them. Go ahead and take my paintbrush, wash it off in the dirty one, clean it, dry it, and let's see what we want to do next, okay? Some of this stuff is bubbling up a little bit. I got some eraser shavings. I wasn't very careful. All right. Now that I've washed my brush, clean, I can come on in here and decide what color I want my kelp to be, my fish to be. I'm gonna go ahead and do this kelp first. Okay, I could use a smaller brush for this. I could use the big brush still. I'm gonna go ahead and touch water. I'm gonna touch some green right here. I'm gonna pull it, some water, color, mix it over here, so water, touch, bring it here, okay? Wash my brush, touch water, get some brown, water, brown. I'm gonna mix it in here. A little too brown there. Wash the brush, touch some green. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna paint directly on top of where I want this stuff to go. Now, if you're not careful and you touch where the blue was, you can see right here where it's starting to bleed into the background. Now that's okay, because watercolor kind of does what it wants, but if you're careful, you can come in and kind of pick it up a little bit with your paintbrush or even a paper towel. So what I'm doing here is I have a big brush, so it's kind of hard to get into these small spaces. So what I would recommend is on these little areas like this, see how careful you have to be? I would just practice with a small brush. That's why it's good to have a couple different brushes, and you can get in here a lot easier. And if that's too hard, look, you even would have maybe another brush laying around your house. This one actually comes with your palette. So what you would do is touch some of this, you come in close, and you can just gently move that paint around into the small areas that you're trying to be real careful with. Okay, real careful with. Touch some paint. Touch where you want it to go. And you just kind of paint inside those lines the best you can. If it goes outside the lines, that's okay. It's watercolor. Watercolor kind of moves and does what it wants. And as you practice, you'll get better and better at putting it exactly where you want it. But for right now, guys, just try your best. Okay? It's going to go outside the lines a little bit. That's okay. All right, we have to kind of practice in order to get better. So I don't want you guys getting all upset if you can't do it exactly like you're thinking you want to do it. Okay? Don't pitch a fit. That's how you get better. Got to practice, okay? So, small brush in a small area, big brush for a big area. All right, so all I'm doing here is adding green, mixing. I'm coming over and filling in some of these areas. All right, now, while this blue is here, what I'm gonna do is wash my brush really good, okay? Wash my brush, get some blue, and what I can do is kind of come back over this with some water, like this blue right here, and while it's still wet with blue, you're going to go ahead and take your salt, add it by pinching and sprinkling salt where the blue is still wet. Now what this is going to do here in a little bit is you'll see it's going to start sucking up some of that color. Okay? It's going to look like bubbles, like water. So you can kind of carefully get it onto that background area, brush it away from any of the areas you don't want, and we just kind of let it sit there while we work on the other picture, okay? So now what I'm going to do, while that's kind of sitting there soaking up some of this blue, I'm going to keep painting on my fish. I'm going to go ahead and do like a red and orange fish. Red, orange, yellow, maybe some purple. Kind of go crazy with it, right? So, got some water. Wash my brush. Water, wash my brush. I'm going to go ahead and take my brush, find out what kind of colors I feel like I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and start with yellow. I'm going to pull it over here. Yellow, pull it over here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and paint this guy yellow. He's probably going to have some red and orange fins. All right, now yellow, wash my brush, touch the orange, move it over, right? All I'm doing is brushing in the color where I want. It's kind of like a coloring book. You're creating a coloring book for yourself. I know a lot of you guys like to color. You're showing me some of your pictures that you do at home. all I'm doing is painting in kind of the area where I want this paint to go. All right. Now, while that's kind of drying in those areas, I can always come back with another brush, a little bit of red, and I can always come in here, add in some of this color. Now again, if it goes outside the lines that you're thinking, with a paper towel, you can always go back and pick it up if you're quick. A little bit of red, maybe some red on the outside edges. Now again, I'm letting the water kind of blend and make new colors as I add over top. So keep that in mind. I've added red to my yellow to make more of an orange. I've added orange to make orangish yellow. Okay, you can always come back in, add colors on top of one another, and turn them to a new color, like orange. Alright, now, you can always come back in after that first layer is dried and always add a second layer. If you feel like you want a little bit more, a crazy contrast in color. Notice how I'm going darker now? So you can always layer it, okay? I went first with a lightish green for my kelp stuff. Now I'm coming back with some darker green because I want it to really stand out in the background. Alright, boys and girls, so now, as this dries, okay, you're gonna have to be careful. You don't want to smear and smudge too much of this stuff around. You can kind of think about anything else that you would want to add to your fish, okay? So some of the things that you could think about, maybe adding some more stuff into your background if you want, but again, we've already added salt there, so I wouldn't mess with it too much, okay? But you can always go back in if you feel like, yeah, you want to try something like that, okay? You can always come in here and add in more grass. After it dries, you can always go in and add another shade of green or some yellow stuff or brown or whatever it is. But for the most part, you just kind of need to let it sit and dry for a little bit so that whenever you come back in and we brush away the salt, it's going to suck all of that moisture from your paper and it's going to create some kind of white spots. As you can see, some of these already starting to form here. So you kind of have to let it sit, let the salt do its thing, and then come back after your paper's dry, and then we'll brush it away and kind of go from there. All right, so sit tight. All right, so I have let my paper dry for a little bit of time, about maybe 20 minutes, half hour or so. The longer you can wait, the better. If you can wait quite a while, it'll really start, you'll be able to tell it's dry. But all you're gonna do is take your finger and all you're gonna do is gently brush away your salt. Okay, you're gonna gently brush away some of this salt. Shake it off, blow it off, okay, be gentle with it. And all you're gonna do by doing this, you'll be able to see is that it's created really cool texture within your artwork, okay? So as you can see, the paper itself is blotchy, okay? It kind of looks like water. That's because the salt has sucked away most of that moisture from your paper, okay, at where the paint was, and it sucked it into the salt, and now you're getting rid of the salt, and what's left is the white space in between. So what you can do here is, again, you can use your pencil, you can always color in some of the other things that you've done. You can always go back in, make some of your lines darker. If you have markers at home and you want to do this with a marker, really bring out some of the colors, the outlines that you've done. You can do that with a marker after it's all the way dry. Otherwise, you can use the pencil that you have, outline your work, almost more cartoony like this, really pops out from the background. So that's just kind of a quick tip for your watercolor lesson for the day. Again, we're just kind of practicing using the watercolor palette with watercolor paper, okay? Bunch of different brushes sizes that you can use, okay? Sometimes it's good to have a variety, so if you have some of the bigger ones at home for the bigger background stuff, that's good. If you have some of the little ones that came, that's really good for some of this in-between stuff. Keep in mind, whenever you do watercolor, you need to work from the background, then to your middle ground, then to your foreground, okay? I know some of you guys might have heard me talk about that with second graders, some of the K4, K5 guys. I really want you kind of working on just mixing your colors for a nice background, adding the salt, okay? I would also maybe recommend, as soon as you've mixed your color, you add the salt straight onto it. That works a little better sometimes, but I'd like you to get some base color down as well. You can always practice in your sketchbook. Practice out which kind of fish you want to do. Okay, in this case, I cut my paper in half, so I have a whole nother paper that I could do another one of these tries, or a new try, a new creature, or something like that if you want it, okay? Well, it's been fun. I hope you enjoyed. I know I did. Stay tuned for another lesson next week. Have fun. See you next week. Bye-bye.